welcome to the Doom Scroll News Report here on Radio Taiwan International, where I, Amanda Stevens, and my co-host,
Hannah Belinsky,
two writers who are political by necessity, cover some of the biggest international news stories dominating our feeds from the last week. I'm Amanda Stevens, and this week we're actually not going to be doing that much news because we thought it would be a nice sort of end to a year of doom scrolling together to discuss ways that we manage our work-life balance, especially as people who work in the news, but also just as regular people in the world trying to stay high information and also high sanity. But really quick before we get into sort of our decompressing, we're going to get hopefully all the stress out of the way right up top by addressing something that happened in Taipei last week, the same day that we recorded, the same day we had a holiday party, December 19th. There was a really vicious and very surprising attack in the Taipei metro. It's actually in my neighborhood. So I was paying a lot of attention to it. But it seems like it was a premeditated attack.
Very.
He lit some fires in Dongsan area, 5 fires that I saw as reported by CNA. We'll link those stories below. After he lit fires in the Linsen area, he threw smoke bombs and attacked people in Taipei main station, seemingly at random, and then went up the road to the nearest MRT station after Taipei, where he went and again attacked people at random before he fell off a building during a police chase. Unfortunately, 4 people passed away, including the attacker, and as of right now, 11 people were injured. The whole thing was very tragic, and honestly, as people who live in Taiwan and Taipei, shocking, because this kind of violence is not normal, especially in sort of like a mass attack kind of thing. So I don't really have any big questions for you, Hannah, other than what was sort of your reaction to this? I know for me, I was grateful that I was at work and everybody that I know was at work.
Yeah, it was really scary because I go to that Elite mall in Zhongshan a lot.
Yeah, actually, that's my mall.
That's mine too.
That's my mall.
And I was actually just planning a trip because we need a new calendar. You know, it's going to be 2026.
Yeah.
And I always get a big wall calendar, and that's where I go.
Yeah.
That's literally the bookstore he jumped off the building from. So I was kind of shaken up.
Yeah. We'll link some CNA sources as some of the most up-to-date ones, at least at time of posting. But this is a good introduction to what I did want to talk about for the rest of the episode, which was how to manage our work-life balance, especially as people who live in the world but work in the news. So, Hannah, we've already discussed some of our biggest news stories of the year. For you, that was the Charlie Kirk shooting. For me, it was the Pete Hegseth saga, although both of them were kind of sagas is the way that we got into it. How have you managed your work life and kind of your news life?
You guys have work-life balance?
It's a myth, I've been told.
I think all you have to do is look at the banner design for Doomscroll to know that I am not very good at managing work-life balance.
It was an insight to both of us.
You know, I gotta be a mom now, which is a job in and of itself, and
also stressful.
Yeah, really stressful. And I gotta admit, I am often multitasking. You know, if I'm nursing my son, or if he's taking a nap, whatever, and I'm looking at the news.
Yeah.
Unfortunately. And with our job being the way it is, too, the news never stops. So we don't get a break unless we arrange one in advance.
We also don't get holidays.
Yeah, and we don't get holidays.
News doesn't have a holiday.
Right. It doesn't stop. So it being so continuous and breaks requiring so much advanced prep, it's really hard to just take time off. I generally feel like I'm just barely staying afloat all of the time. Help me.
But recently more and more so. I would say for me the experience is similar, but I feel like I go through phases where I'm managing pretty well and I'm pretty well balanced, and then phases where everything is on fire. I told you privately last week I was not doing well. And it wasn't one thing either. It wasn't one thing that I could pinpoint. It was just a whole bunch of things. And the news was definitely a part of that. But when things are going well for me, I know one habit that I try to stick to is having a dedicated news time with a few exceptions for stories that I'm following or I'm interested in. Then I will check them. Otherwise, I make my coffee, I get ready for the day, and I listen to news for 45 minutes in the morning. And then I move on to other stuff.
That's interesting because I think it's almost kind of opposite for me where I block out a period of time during the day when I don't do anything but something I enjoy, like knit or watch YouTube or whatever. Instead of having just a dedicated hour for the news, I have a dedicated hour just for me to veg out because that is unfortunately the ratio with which I have to work to make it happen.
Well, and we'll get into those habits in a second, but I also wanted to touch base with some other people who work in the news and even outside of RTI. So upcoming, we're going to have a couple of interviews with Leslie Liao from Taiwan Plus. We'll also hear from Eric Gao, who works for Taiwan Plus, previously ICRT, and our very own Iris Hsu, who does a lot more hard-hitting news stories and interviews than we tend to do. So we're going to check in with them for how they manage their work life and their mental health. Thank you for coming to RTI. It's so nice to actually have you here after all the times that we have talked, but never actually in the studio.
First time in the studio with you, though I have been with one of your coworkers, Michelle.
Yes. So could you please introduce yourself?
My name is Eric Gao. I've been in the news in Taiwan for about 20 years now, mostly on radio, recently in TV. I've been a news writer and news reader, most recently a copy editor and news anchor. So my job description is copy editor, and then I anchor on the side.
So then let me start with this question, whatever the answer is. Was there any news stories that came across your field that really grabbed you this year?
Not so much. My job as a copy editor is to look at what our reporters have done. So they write their scripts for either the pieces for the anchors to read or the pieces that they voice themselves. Copy editors go through, do fact-checking, do writing for style, writing for readability out loud, things like that. So I'm not really invested in any particular story. And as a copy editor, we tend to go through more stories each day than a reporter will because they're researching background and, contacting analysts for bites and things like that. And we kind of look at the final product and make sure that everything is up to our standards, that this is something that our international audience can understand. We're not putting too much local detail that kind of isn't necessary, things like that.
Right. So it just sounds like there's a high volume of news stories that you kind of go through on a daily basis. So to that end, then, something that I think a lot of people have struggled with this year, myself included, is how to balance your kind of peace of mind while also, whether necessitated by your career or just out of a sense of personal responsibility, trying to stay high information. So how have you managed your personal time versus the time that you have to spend kind of engaged at the news?
I think over the course of my professional career, I've separated, I should say, my work life and my personal life. Even though I've worked in news my entire professional career, I actually do not consume news.
Outside
of work
hours.
Yes. I'm not on most social media. I'm not on Twitter. I don't watch the news. I don't subscribe to any feeds or anything like that. My philosophy is I can look it up when I'm at work.
You'll learn about it when you're at work.
Because it's impossible to stay across everything. Right? And it's kind of futile to try and absorb everything.
And it's really exhausting, especially with the current news cycle. We say this all the time on this show, but the news cycle, it feels like it's shorter and shorter every year when a new story comes out or when the situation has changed.
And to be fair, in the last few years, things have become a lot more harrowing.
Yeah.
In my first decade of work, there were no wars to be covered, right?
There was the Afghan war, but that had kind of reached a standstill.
Right, there wasn't
perma war status. It wasn't an ongoing invasion conflict.
And also, the Western media does not care as much about those conflicts.
Yeah, that's important. No, right? We've talked about that before with some of the other conflict coverage here.
So, like I said, it's been much more harrowing these last few years. I think it's probably best for everyone if we could all distance ourselves from that constant deluge of this bad thing is happening in this part of the world. This bad thing is happening. And it's happening right next in my backyard now.
Yeah.
Things like that.
So then, and it sounds like if you were to give advice, a lot of it would be to sort of one, maybe limit the amount of time that you spend engaging with the news every day and kind of have stricter limits about that. Another one that you didn't give as advice, but something that I'm going to just go on a limb and say helps you a lot is also by limiting your exposure to social media.
Yes. Definitely. Definitely.
Then the last one I'll wrap up with is, do you feel like you have, outside of those two things, are there any other habits related to the news or not that you keep that you think help keep you kind of like grounded in today? And that could be like a hobby that you enjoy doing, or like, I know my dad used to like make it a rule to always go for a walk 2 or 3 times a day.
That's a very good rule. I think the biggest thing is understanding your own personal limitations and setting boundaries. We've known each other for quite some time now, and you understand that my spoons are quite limited. At my current workplace, at my previous job, I probably had to interact with maybe 10 people a day.
Yeah.
And half of that will just be, you know, hi, how are you? Just
it's like the
people in the halls.
pleasantries.
Yes.
It's the
Not
surface
even,
level talk.
Not even full sentences. Right? Just, now, that's probably gone up to 20 or 30 people in a day,
and giving
minimum.
feedback also
and
as an
speaking,
editor.
And yes, like also dealing in 2 languages at once.
Yeah.
Also, you know, anchoring a show, that takes a separate...
A whole other helping of like personal energy.
Exactly.
Yes.
So I think, what's that quote? Like, give me the strength to change the things I can, to accept the things I can't, and the wisdom to know the difference.
Yeah.
And I think I've learned the difference.
Yeah.
I help where I can, but I think I've also fine-tuned my radar of if my help will actually help.
Right. And then applying that like broader also, like when thinking about things that you might read, where to put your emotional investment.
Exactly.
Right. Like which doesn't necessarily mean not to know about it, but like how much personal investment you give to it should be sort of related to how much you feel like you're able to affect what's happening there.
So in general, I think just distancing oneself from not just your work, but also your work environment. Not everyone in the workplace deserves the same amount of interaction, because that's impossible, folks. It's impossible.
You're going to burn out fast.
Yes.
Burn out fast. All right. Thank you for joining us today, Iris. I really appreciate it. Could you please introduce yourself for the listeners? Some of them have probably heard you on The Divide, but there's a possibility maybe they haven't yet.
Sure. So my name is Iris Hsu. I am a reporter and a host here at Radio Taiwan International. I host a program called The Divide, where I talk about current affairs, interview people on things that's happening at the moment.
And so this is one reason I wanted to talk to you, because I feel like you have one of the most like hard-hitting news shows at our studio. So I wanted to ask you first, was there one news story for 2025 that like stuck out to you more than any others? And if so, what was it?
I think it certainly has to be what just happened last Friday, where there was an attack at the Taipei station and the Zhongshan MRT station.
We mentioned it a little bit in the intro of our show. Is there a reason that it stuck out to you other than the fact that like it's so unusual in Taiwan?
Well, it is unusual.
Yeah, it's I don't know how to impress that upon other people. Like these kind of like mass violent attacks like are something that doesn't really happen in Taiwan. People aren't really prepared to deal with it because it just doesn't happen.
Yeah. I think there are 2 sides of this, right? We don't see these kind of incidents in our daily lives. And because of it, we are unprepared. Yet, I think Taiwanese people, as a society, we're not prone to violence. And that is a good thing.
Yeah.
But also because of that, we are unprepared.
Yeah. So when something like this happens, it can take more time for it to be stopped, I guess, because people did try.
Yeah.
But we don't really have a lot of information out there on like what to do in this situation.
Yeah, I think it takes longer for us to react to certain things like this.
Right.
When I saw clips of the incidents, people filming on their camera, you can see that people just froze because they thought, oh, wait, is this real? Or is this a drill?
Right. Like, is this something I should intervene in, or is somebody going to do something? Like, I don't know what to do. So stories like this are something that we have to pay attention to as journalists. You were the one who wrote the breaking news on that. But in general, how do you feel like you're able to manage your work-life balance, especially someone who works in the news and is really chasing down a lot of what I think are some of the most like politically motivated stories in our RTI news feed?
Funny you mentioned that, because you probably noticed I don't write daily news.
Yeah.
I am usually in the office to cover breaking news like the one that happened last Friday. And I have to say, it really affected me in my personal life because after I wrote the story on my bus ride home, it's a long 1 hour bus ride.
You have a lot of time to think.
Yes. And I gradually get more angry as I think about the story, what happened to those people and why is there someone like that. And I took a long walk at like a stop before my stop.
Yeah.
And decided to just kind of take a stroll, walk home, calm myself down before I reach my door.
Touch grass, so to speak, like we say on this show. But I think that speaks to something too. It's really hard to try to keep the news separated, and especially when it's something that you feel or you can see is like affecting your daily life or places that you know and love or people you know and love. The separation of it is really hard because it doesn't feel like there is that separation. To that end, then the last question I'll ask you is, do you have any like hobbies or anything that you do that you feel like helps keep you grounded in kind of like your daily life for your own sake?
I do. I cook.
You bake for us.
Yes.
I know. We're always excited.
I'm glad some people like my baking. I bake at midnight.
I've done it before. I could never point fingers.
Yeah, at the end of the day, it's that smell, it's that, routine, it's mixing your batter that kind of calm me down.
Plus, it's like there's sort of like a ritual to it, right? Like you're following the recipe and you know that at the end of it, like you will have something to show for your work.
Yes.
That is also nice for you.
Yes.
It's not like something that is going to bum you out in some way.
Yeah, that's how it works.
Yeah. Thank you for coming in. Could you please introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about like what your job is?
Yeah, so my name is Leslie Liao. I'm 35 years old. I've been living in Taiwan for about 12 years at this point, and I've worked in news for close to 10. And I used to work in radio, so I used to work at RTI. If we have any loyal listeners, I did #Taiwan, where I went over a lot of the trending fun news that was on social media. So not quite doom scrolling. I commend you,
Thank you,
Amanda,
thank you.
for going through the scary stuff, the stuff that kind of makes you lose your faith in humanity.
I feel bad, yeah.
But I used to work at RTI, and then I joined Taiwan's new TV English initiative, Taiwan Plus. I'm a reporter and news anchor there. I've been there for about 3 years and 3 months at this point. And while a lot of my job is anchoring the news, I also do a lot of the news myself. So when I'm not on TV, I'm out there also getting some of the news stories and doing a lot of the frontline work.
So then, since you've been working in news also for quite a long time, good news and then whatever news is handed your way, did you have any news stories that stuck out to you over 2025?
2025, a lot of crazy news. There was the big recalls that Taiwan had, where they tried to recall 32 legislators en masse to try and flip the power in the legislature. That was crazy because leading up to it, it was this huge campaign. It had never been done before. It was a huge mobilization of political assets. I mean, there's also the argument to be made that these were civic groups doing the
and it
job.
Started as like a grassroots thing.
It
started with a recall petition.
And there were all the opposition Kuomintang, right?
Yeah.
And it was a huge thing. It seemed like there was a lot of momentum on the recall campaigner side. And the next thing you know, the recall vote comes and nobody gets recalled.
No, and it almost felt like nobody showed up even.
Yeah.
Which was like to see the momentum just stop dead, like it hit a brick wall.
Yeah. So you were like, whoa, what happened there? And from a news perspective, that actually made me really rethink a lot of the things that we see online when we scroll around. Your feed is filled with this recall news and it looks like you're like, oh, wow, someone's going to get recalled, but then nothing happens. And you're thinking, okay, so what's the difference between what I'm seeing online and what the actual public sentiment is?
Right. Almost like, how much of an echo chamber am I in that I think this is so big? But it clearly isn't as big as I think.
Absolutely not. So I guess this is wild, right? These are the kind of times that we're living in.
Well, and that's to the point that there is a lot of stuff to keep up with, and when it feels like you've covered the biggest thing this year, something else pops up and it becomes the biggest thing this year. So how do you manage your like work-life balance and also the burden of trying to stay, what we've been saying a lot recently is like high information, but not letting that come into your actual life? It's
tough. It really is. And you are the one, as the journalist, you are the one responsible for putting down the boundary of where you got to stop the work, right? It's totally okay to not be abreast of everything. Sometimes it's okay to be asking people, okay, you're giving me the story, I need to know the background. Because
like catch me up.
Because at my current company, I run 2 desks. One is the sports desk and one is the local politics desk.
Wow.
And these are 2 topics that cannot get further from the other. But not only that, but because I'm a lot more experienced, some of the more nuanced news stories, they also ask me to cover, the editorial team. So it really is easy to get overwhelmed. And whenever I'm on a weekend or I get over a weekend, it really does feel like you've just missed the train on a lot of news stories and you got to catch yourself up. But the thing is, part of being a journalist is being able to catch up fast. So for the weekends, I'm just like, I'm not touching anything, work anything. If it's my day off, it's my day off. Because if I'm the kind of person who gets interfered with very easily. So you also have to realize that, hey, recharging is very important. It helps you excel during the week when you're being a journalist. And you have to capitalize on that time.
So it sounds like what I'm hearing from you is putting down your boundaries is really important, but also not feeling like you need to shoulder the burden of being informed by yourself. Like it's okay for you to also lean on other people or sit and chat and catch up, but within a certain allotted space, like keeping your personal space personal.
Absolutely. I mean, there are some news stories that I am personally invested in or like I have a personal interest in, and following those, there's no problem.
It kind of refills your cup as you're following it, you know? So the last question I'll ask you is, do you have any like hobbies that you feel like helps you stay grounded or helps you just to kind of like de-stress and reconnect?
To de-stress is I completely detach myself from reality. So I play video games.
Yes.
I just lose myself in, I got a new TV. It's massive. And it's just a great way to kind of lose yourself. I also have a dog and, you know, we kind of mess around. You know, she's almost 2 at this point.
So still crazy.
She's nuts.
Yeah.
She's nuts.
So I thought that was very enlightening. Thank you to all of our special guests, Eric Gao, Leslie Liao, and Iris Hsu. But to wrap it up, Hannah, what are some hobbies that you have that you feel keep you grounded during your, you said, 1 hour of me time per day?
Well, I always have my knitting. I think just the repetitive nature of that activity is, it helps mellow me out. That helps a lot. And then, of course, my constant hitting the gym.
Yeah.
Thank God I can do that. I don't know what kind of person I would be like if I couldn't get that energy out.
It really does help. It really,
helps
everybody says
lot.
exercise helps a lot. I used to go for walks and I'd put on my headphones. I'd go for like an hour-long walk. That helps. For me, the other thing is I really still like to play video games.
Oh, me too, but I didn't want to mention it.
I know. And I like to, if I can, I like to try to play video games like with other people collaboratively, but like couch co-op.
Yeah.
I guess the last boring thing would be actually cleaning.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Cleaning can help a lot.
I love doing that. I don't love doing it, but I'm a stress cleaner.
Yeah. No, I feel way better about life after I have scrubbed the daylights out of my bathroom.
I was just going to say it's my dishes for me. I'm like, I'll just wash everything I can. But what keeps you grounded? What helps you guys stay in the now? And in the meantime, that's all the time that we have for today. Thank you for tuning in. I'm Amanda Stevens.
I'm Hannah Belinsky.
And thanks for joining us on air today. Tune in tomorrow for more programs by Radio Taiwan International. And in the meantime, remember to stop scrolling, touch grass, get out there. And we'll see you next week in 2026.